Hey guys, welcome. So in this video, I'm going to be answering questions from you guys in regards to comments being submitted. We'll go through a bunch of them. This video, this particular setup is going to be talking about the Canon R10, or all the comments I got on the Canon R10 videos I had posted over the last month or so. So the first one is from Andrew Hernandez. He says, "Thank you for your video. Good job. Very informative. Of all the cameras that you have owned, which is your favorite?" That's actually a difficult question to answer. And the reason I say this is because each camera is each camera that I have, it wasn't a purchase that was made on a whim. Thought and deliberation kind of went into making the decision of whether or not I should get a particular camera. And I'll tell you what makes each of these different cameras special to me. So let's just start with let's start with this one right here, the Insta360. I'm actually using the 1-inch edition right now. This camera is special to me because my wife gifted it to me on my birthday. And so it was one of those things where my wife saw me watching these reviews, and I was just kind of doing my research, and I was planning on making a purchase, and then she surprised me with this camera. This is about maybe 2 years ago, when the Insta360 1R, when that came out. And so, and one of the things I like about it is because of how many videos I've done with family and whatnot, especially the 360 stuff. In fact, I've actually worn out the 360 lens. I also have the Canon EOS M6 Mark II that I'm recording on right here, right now. This camera is special because of the fact that it's my first truly reliable autofocus camera that also opened up a lot of opportunities for me with regards to taking photos and high resolution photos and dynamic range beyond anything I had owned prior to that. Now, before the EOS M6 Mark II, I've also had the G85 and the GH5. Those are fantastic cameras with regards to video. And prior to that, I think the longest running camera that I still use that holds a special place in my heart, I don't know if it's my favorite, but it definitely has a special place for me, is my first interchangeable lens camera, which is the Canon EOS M, the original Canon EOS M, which is also the first mirrorless camera from Canon. And the reason it's special is because that camera truly sucked until Magic Lantern came out. And the reason the camera really sucked was because I didn't know anything about interchangeable lenses. And so when I bought it, I was thinking I'm going to be able to put all these Canon lenses on there, but turns out that it's a different mount from the standard DSLR cameras. Because prior to that, I had rented this Canon 7D and different lenses, and I'm like, this is great. When I bought the EOS M, not realizing that it's a different mount, I'm like, this is dumb. Like I can't. And I didn't feel like, because I bought that camera for like $350, and then buying an adapter from Canon to put the original EF lenses on there was going to cost me another $250. I'm like, yo, the adapter itself is as much as the camera almost. And so as a result, that camera it gave me a little bit of buyer's remorse. But since Magic Lantern came out, being able to do raw video, I feel like the EOS M to this day is a tool that allows me to grow in the skill of video and the craft of video more than almost any of these other cameras. The learnings I have there, I can apply directly to a action camera, or to this kind of camera, or to the Sony. Even what I learned in grading and learning how to grade raw video beyond photo is also the same skill that I was able to transfer directly onto editing HLG and S-Log footage on the Sony. So I appreciate that camera a lot. So maybe that's considered my favorite camera. Trollo Ackerman, I guess we've got a Attack on Titan fan here, asks, which would you say has better image quality and skin tones, the R10, the ZVE10, or M6 Mark II? All right, so Canon, so there's a couple of differences. I don't know about better because it's genuinely subjective. Canon video in general tends to run warmer in regards to its tone, and I guess its hue. It tends to have a warmer hue, whereas Sony tends to have a cooler hue. Now, there are certain situations in which I like the warmer hue, or I prefer the warmer hue over the cooler hue. And there's certain situations I prefer the cooler hue over the warmer hue. I'll explain. When indoors, I would rather have a warmer hue. It's just my personal subjective impression of an indoor setting. You would want it to be a warmer setting. Canon naturally does that more because it just pumps a warmer hue, especially in the shadows and in the midtones. Whereas Sony tends to make it a lot more cooler in regards to its hue. I actually prefer the Sony colors just naturally standard picture profile in an outdoor, bright, high contrast type of setting, like, middle of the day type of setting. So yeah, I mean, those are the situations where so I like it's the setting in which I'm using the footage. I don't think the skin tones are perfect in either the Sony, Canon, or even Panasonic. There's always a little bit of adjustment that I need to make, especially in the areas of yellow. Now, Sony tends to make yellow, like I would have to move or adjust the yellow hue in the color grade in Lumetri a little bit more with Sony. But at the end of the day, if I'm going to be grading the footage in the edit, it really doesn't matter because I'm going to be making that adjustment anyway, regardless of whether it's Canon, Sony, or Panasonic. Now, on the other hand, with Canon being my everyday carry kind of camera, I like the look coming out with this specific combination, which is the Canon 22mm f2 on the M6 Mark II, specifically this lens. There's an aesthetic or a look that comes with the lens that is different from other lenses. So it's not the sharpest lens in the world, but at the same time, I think the image that comes out of it, just straight out of camera, looks great. And I think it's also a perk with the fact that it's such a small and compact setup. Would the video in standard picture profile, either on the R10 or the ZV-E10, would it do just fine? Yeah, standard picture profile generally looks fine, but again, Sony tends to run a little bit cooler, Canon tends to run a little bit warmer. So that's it. Again, it's really a preference thing. And so, but in both cases, I think they both look good. So you can't really go wrong with either of them. Christopher Smith says, I just got the Canon R10. Congratulations. And I was hoping that you would do a setup for clean HDMI settings. It's not exactly clear from the owner's manual. I can hear almost everything except the autofocus. It keeps tracking my eyes, and the little white box keeps showing up in the feed when you're connecting through HDMI. So I actually did a video talking about the setup. I guess I'll link it in the at the end of this. But one of the things that you have to do, whether it's the Canon R10 or the EOS M6 Mark II or any camera from Canon that has a clean HDMI output, what you need to do is you need to select, you got to go into the menus and you need to select clean HDMI. OG Joystick Shinobi is asking, with regards to the video where I was showcasing the Canon R10, what camera was I using to actually record the video? That's this camera right here, which is the Canon EOS M6 Mark II. And if you're wondering how I was able to record video continuously, I basically I didn't record video on the camera itself. I had, what I'd done is I'd connected it via the HDMI cable onto my laptop, and I was recording via OBS Studio. So that way it helps me bypass the 30-minute record limit or any situation of overheating in 4K. Marcin Palka states or asks, how does the Canon R10 compare to the M6 Mark II? Does it feel like a substantial upgrade? I'm kind of sitting on a fence, not able to make up my mind between this one and the Canon R10. So, all right, so with regards to photography, the Canon R10 and the M6 Mark II and even the R7 are on par. In fact, the M6 Mark II might be slightly better for photos because it's faster, it's got higher resolution. I know the R10 and the R7 both of them have the new Digic X processor, but so those are the real differences. So if you're talking about whether one camera is better for photography, in terms of its ability to take photos, I don't think there's going to be much of a difference. The real difference is that the R10 is a significant upgrade, in my opinion, with relation to video features in comparison to the Canon M6 Mark II. I'll explain why. The M6 Mark II has a number of frustrating limitations, at least for me, that I feel like had it not been for these limitations, it would be a great, almost nearly perfect camera. So limitation number one is a 30-minute record limit. And so if I'm doing a video like this where I know I'm going to not sit here for more than 30 minutes to answer these questions, then that's fine. But in a situation where I'm recording a class or an instructional or something where I have a long form recording set up, or I'm recording an event or something, I can't do that with this camera. It's not only am I going to hit a 30-minute record limit, then what's going to happen is after about 45 minutes of, if I press record again, around the 45-minute mark in totality, the camera's going to overheat in 4K. So that's just a complete no-no. In order for me to continue recording, I'm going to have to scale down to 1080p, and the quality of the video that's in 1080p is not very good. So that's number one. Number two is that the 4K in this video is not true 4K. What do I mean by that? So this camera here, the on the Insta360, this is a 5K camera. I'm using the 1-inch mod from Leica, and it's actually 5.2K, which I'm now adjusting or whatever and squeezing down to 4K. So it's going to be generally a sharp image. Now, because the sensor is smaller than the Canon, you might not have the same level of dynamic range. But what's happening here is on the Canon, it's taking a 7K image, which is 32 megapixels, and it's taking like every other pixel, which is seemingly called pixel binning. What that does is then you end up with a 3.2K image, which then gets stretched up to 4K. Now, the upside of that is because there's a lot of information that's being now canceled out, and so the processing time gets reduced, well, you end up with a lot less rolling shutter. This is something that's very much known in a lot of Sony cameras, where if you do a lot of dynamic movements, what ends up happening is that you get this jello effect. You really don't have that, or it's not even, it's not really that much noticeable on the Canon M6 Mark II. That's where the pro and con comes in with regards to pixel binning as opposed to oversampling. When you pixel bin, you're not going to get the rolling shutter, you're not going to get the jello, but you're also not going to get the sharpest image possible. It's going to be kind of soft. Now, for a video like this, that's actually, it doesn't really matter. The situation comes into play is when you're maybe pairing footage, although I don't know if you'll notice here because this is like a 5K image and this is a 3.2K image that's being up to 4K and then kind of edited together. So I don't know. You tell me if you notice a difference. But even if you do notice a difference, does it make that much of a difference in regards to this format of video? I don't think it does, in my opinion. So, but it's still a limitation. So if I wanted to pair this in a multicam setting where it's like professional and whatnot, and I have cameras that do oversampling, it doesn't really make sense for me to mix this into the bag because it's gonna look significantly different, at least to me. So, and this is where, like, you're getting paid to do that kind of work, right? You want to make it look as best as possible. So for that reason, I wouldn't include that in the kit if I don't have to. So, although in one instance I did because my GH5 had broken. It's fixed now, but because my GH5 was out of commission, this was actually the bench warmer that was taken off the bench and put in the game. And so I was stuck with the whole recording every 30 minutes and whatnot. The other major factor with regards to M6 Mark II is ergonomics. On one hand, it's small, but man, that grip sucks. In fact, the R10 is not that much bigger than this, but it's so much easier to hold. Like, to be able to hold that with confidence and with comfort, I can't do that with this camera. Because the grip on this is actually really, it's lame. I've dropped this camera. This is actually a replacement camera. The original camera that I had fell because of the grip, and I've got generally larger hands, right? I can palm a basketball. And a tiny camera like this where I'm literally using 3 fingers and I don't even have my, like, the A7C is not that much bigger, but it's actually got a grip, and I don't have to worry about dropping that. Whereas with this, even though it's got a sticky texture, it's I'm not very comfortable holding it from the grip side. I'm actually better off holding it like this for whatever reason, because I can put my hands behind all the way to grip and not worry about pressing any buttons. Important. So you'll notice here how this is plugged in via USB-C, right? Because this camera, as it's recording, it's also being powered through the USB-C. I can't do that with the Canon M6 Mark II. I can do it with the R10. I can plug the R10 in and I can operate it while it's charging. And so Whereas with the Canon M6 Mark II, I have to pick. I'm either going to operate or I'm going to charge. I can't operate while charging, nor can I operate while plugged in through the USB-C. For that, I need to get a dummy battery. And the thing I find extremely annoying about the dummy battery is that I put the dummy battery in, fine, I'll be able to power it through a wall outlet. But the moment I take the dummy battery out and I put in a regular battery in, everything resets in regards to the date and time. I have to reset the date and time and all that, and it's so annoying. So, like that in and of itself, I think these upgrades would be worth upgrading to the R10. Also, it's not a big deal for me, but I know a lot of folks, they prefer to have a viewfinder. I don't. In fact, I couldn't care less for a viewfinder. I never use it. The only instance in which I found value in a viewfinder is when I bought a camera where I knew the LCD screen was busted. I was going to put a monitor on it anyway, but having the viewfinder allowed me to back up to access it, which was the GH4. I got it for real cheap because it was a busted screen. So, but other than that, I don't care for the viewfinder. I would prefer not to have it to give the camera a lower profile. So, but on the R10, the viewfinder is actually pretty small. In fact, a lot of people complain about how small and low quality seemingly the viewfinder is. Doesn't matter to me. It's small. It fits in my hand really well. It has oversampled 6K footage, gives you sharp. The only downside of the R10 in regards to the footage is that you'll get a little bit of that rolling shutter, but you have the option of going into the oversampled versus the pixel bin, and so you can basically choose what's your priority. Is it oversample footage or is it low rolling shutter footage? So that's something good to know. The other thing also that comes into play is if you're considering the R7. The R7 costs $500 more. Is it worth $500 more in terms of the areas of value? The areas of value to me that the R7 might possibly have, which may be worth considering, is a few things. One, dual card slots, definitely helpful for redundancy and continuous recording after the card fills up. So this way, if I'm, let's say, recording a seminar, I would prefer the R7 over the R10 because of the fact that, and even like that's one of the things I like about the GH5 is that the dual card slots and I had the XD cams, they had dual card slots too. So while I'm recording a seminar where we're going hours and hours at a time, recording a class, and in the middle of the session, like the card will now continue recording onto the second card, and then I can swap out the other card and I can start transferring. I can't do that with the ZV-E10. I can't do that with the R10. I'm assuming I would be able to do that with the R7. R7 also has IBIS, and IBIS is great if you're considering taking photos. It allows you to run that shutter speed a little bit lower or slower and get a brighter image without much motion blur, which is great. It might be helpful for you with regards to video if you talk about removing micro jitters where you're holding the camera and you get those, especially when you're on the long end. But the thing is, I actually prefer not to have IBIS. Rather, the IBIS on an R7 is a deal breaker for me. Why? It's like, hey, he's got IBIS. You got GH5, you got G85. Like, they've got IBIS. Yeah, they do. You can turn it off. Whereas on the R7, you can't. Or even the R5 and the R6, you can't turn off the IBIS. It's annoying. Like, you should be able to turn it off. And the reason is because what I like to do, and this is something that Sony put me on too, which is gyro-based data stabilization, or gyro data-based stabilization, where it captures the gyroscopic data, you put it through Catalyst Browse, and it stabilizes the footage for you. Now, Canon and these other cameras, they don't have it built in, but I can mount an Insta360 right on top of that camera. I can take the gyroscopic data, the gyroflow data from the Insta360, map it to the Canon, and gyroflow will stabilize it just as good, if not better. And gives me a lot more options to also play around with in terms of how much stabilization I want, what's the field of view I wanted to crop in and all that. So, and the fact that I can do that without, and being able to turn off the noise reduction also, in the R10 and I believe also in the R7, you have control over noise reduction. You can turn it off, you can turn it on. I prefer that the camera does not do any noise reduction, so when I process it, I can do my own after the fact. And so the gyro-based data-based stabilization, when there's noise reduction being applied on camera at higher ISOs, especially on Sony cameras, there's artifacts. And I can't turn that off unless I record the footage via an HDMI cable. So that's just something to consider. It's a little annoying on the R7 that I can't turn that off. So if I wanted to stabilize it, I'm stuck. All right. However, if it's going to be a static camera that's going to be mounted on a tripod or a slider or something like that, then it doesn't matter because it's already stable. I'm not moving it, so the IBIS is essentially is redundant. Oh, and the other major factor, which none of these cameras here, neither the, to my knowledge, the Insta360, nor the M6 Mark II, nor the R10, they're all 8-bit cameras. Now, the R7 is a 10-bit camera. GH5 is a 10-bit camera, and I can tell you right now, the amount of flexibility I have in my ability to grade. And what do I mean by grade? I'm not talking about being able to adjust shadows and highlights that a log or HLG, hybrid log gamma type footage gives you. No, that's fine. You can do that in 8-bit, not a problem. It's the color information. So, many times, what I'll do is I'll record a seminar, I might throw a color splash on a wall, but then I want to make tweaks to those colors, maybe change those colors altogether. Sometimes people, if I'm recording folks in the audience and whatnot in a class setting, and I'm trying to color coordinate or color theme the look of the seminar, and people are kind of wearing all kinds of colors, what I'll do is I'll literally go in and I'll change the colors of the outfits to match the look and feel. I can do that with 10-bit. I cannot, it's very difficult for me to do that. And it requires a lot more work and a lot more fine tuning without breaking the footage in 8-bit. And so that's one of the benefits of using 10-bit. Now, you can avoid all that if you plan everything beforehand, but there's a lot of factors that are out of your control in what I would consider a documentary-esque setup that otherwise would be impossible. Like, I can't tell people, like, if we're recording a class, for example, and the students are participating, they're going to be on camera and whatnot, I can't tell them what to wear. Even if I do and they don't, what am I going to do? Send them home? Like, that, it doesn't work like that. Whereas if you're shooting something that's narrative and controlled, then yeah, you can determine everything. You could probably get away with 8-bit. And so that's one of the advantages that I see 10-bit for. Now, I know the R10 has 10-bit, but it's in a special HDR format, which I didn't bother using. So, but outside of that, like, the only thing that I wish that the R10 did have that the R7 does is C-log footage, which I know they do it only because it's 10-bit. And it also retains the color information. But I would also rather, like with Sony, I can get S-Log2, even S-Log3, and recover a lot of the or save a lot of the dynamic range information in terms of the shadows and the highlights, all compressed in that 8-bit format, and I can stretch it out and it still looks good. It looks better than it does in standard picture profile or HLG. Granted, I have the right exposure. I can't really do that. Like all of this here, this is everything outside this window is going to be overexposed with an 8-bit camera, especially on the Canon, and there's not much I can do to recover that. Or even on the Insta360. Although on the Insta360, I am recording in some form of vlog, but I don't know how much that actually helps. What about if I'm building a home studio? Which camera would I consider? Now, a big part of this is going to be determined by your budget. Minimum multi-camera setup, you're looking at, let's say your home studio, you want a regular like talking headpiece, and then you want maybe something overhead. Or you want a B cam, right? That's a 2-camera setup. You're talking about doubling your price. Let's say you want a 3-camera setup for like podcast interviews or anything like something like you're doing a podcast series or whatnot, a video podcast. You want multi-cam in that regard. Then that's easily 3 cameras or even 5 cameras. I shoot 5 or 6. So when you're shooting 5 or 6 cameras, yeah, your cost is definitely going to multiply. So you've got to consider how much you're going to be spending. A starting home studio set, we're talking about 2 cameras, a wide angle and a tight angle. Well, I mean, like this is multi-camera, right? You got a $500 camera Insta360, you got a $600 some camera now, the Canon EOS M6 Mark II. I would replace that and I would get an R10 if I was in a position to choose. then for sure. Now there's a price difference. You get this for now for like $650. You get the R10 for like $1,000. So it's gonna cost you maybe $350 more than the Canon M6 Mark II. You could also consider the costs of the accessories and adapters. I don't see any really good native lenses like the 22 f2, except that you're adapting something from the EF line. Like a lens that I would get for, let's say, the R10 is the Sigma Art, not the Sigma Art, but like the Sigma Art 30mm HSM f1.4. It's fast, it's a bright lens, and it's EF, and you can adapt it via an RF to EF adapter, which costs you about $100. So that's a $300 lens. So if you're talking about like a good, bright, high quality setup, like a $300 lens with $100 adapter is $400 plus a $1,000 camera, now you're at about $1,500, right? So that coupled with maybe a second camera, whether that second camera is an Insta360 or a second R10, so you talk about getting two of them, that's something to consider. If I were starting out fresh, knowing what I know now, I would most definitely consider getting 3 Canon R7s for studio. Like, let's say I want to record a video podcast or an interview type series, I would get 3 Canon R7s personally. Because of the dual car slots, because of the oversampled image, because of the fact that there's a whole slew of cheap EF lenses that I already have, but if I didn't have them, I know which ones to get to create my wides and tights. And if I had a little bit more money though, because now we're talking about $1,500 cameras, if I had a little bit more money, I would also consider maybe getting 3 FX3s, which is now, it's $1,800, right? It's a $300 difference between the R7 and the FX30, but $300 multiplied by 3, you're talking about nearly $1,000 now, $900 plus tax and all that, nearly $1,000 difference between the same kind of setup. And so definitely something worth considering. Now, I would think that the lenses between the three of them, if you're going to pick on any lens just for the sake of growth and compatibility, I would highly recommend getting Sigma Art lenses. Whether it's a Sigma 18-35, the 50-100, the 31.4 HSM, DG HSM, not the GN, but not the mirrorless versions, but the EF versions. Any EF Canon art lens coupled with the MC11 adapter for Sony, or the Viltrox or Canon EF to RF adapter, those would essentially work for you. He says, how many minutes can the Canon R10 record? So how many minutes can the Canon R10 record? So the Canon R10 and the R7 are can both record until your camera battery dies or your card fills up. Essentially, it's unlimited recording internally, and so now the thing is, this is actually one of the major, probably, if there was one reason to get the R10 over the M6 Mark II, is this for this reason alone. It is the fact that you're not going to be, if it had every limitation that the M6 Mark II had, except for the 30-minute limit, it would be worth upgrading, in my opinion. And so it'll save you whatever issues with regards to bypassing the limit through HDMI and whatnot. And so, yeah, you don't have the issue, which is huge, I think. Took Canon long enough to be able to do that. So that's it for now, guys. Let me know if you have any. So guys, let me know if you like this format, you like me just going through the comments, answering your questions about a specific series of topics, or a specific series of videos that I posted recently in the comments that you've been submitting. Thank you for your interaction. Appreciate it. Lets me know that the work that I'm doing is of value and benefiting folks. If you have any other questions, let me know in the comments below. I'll see you soon.